Holland, a city located in Ottawa County, Michigan, is a peaceful place perfect for relaxation with many interesting tourist spots. However, beneath this serene exterior lay dark secrets that led to a horrific crime, which not only shattered a seemingly perfect family, but also pushed the boundaries of moral decency surrounding familial relationships. The central figure in this case is Ryan Wyngarden, born on December 12, 1962. He grew up in a large family with 7 siblings born between 1955 and 1974. Lynn, Terry, Breck, Chia, David, Cheryl, and Gail Mary, who was known to have been born on April 24, 1965. Their mother, Dorothy, was married to Wendell, a World War II veteran who worked for 26 years at a woodshop until he retired. Wendell was also a member of the Central West Leiden Church, where he participated for over 50 years and sang in the choir for more than 37 years. It's not hard to imagine that this family was led by a deeply religious man. One could say the Wyngarden family lived a peaceful life with no major disturbances. To everyone who knew them, they seemed like the perfect family. Thus, no one was prepared for the shocking twist that fate had in store. Sometime in the 1980s, Gail met Lee Brink. Some of his relatives recalled, the day he met her, he said, "Gail is the one for me." And he was right. In a very short time, they built a strong, loving relationship. Rick, born on February 12, 1958, was 7 years older than Gail and had an older brother named Bart. Both brothers were raised by their mother, Lee Brink. In early 1986, Gail and Rick got married, continuing the solid relationship they had built over the years. Family, friends, and those close to them all believed they were a wonderful couple. As the late 1980s passed, Ryan's life took a completely different turn compared to his sister and brother-in-law. He faced several challenges, struggling with unemployment. According to some sources, he barely made ends meet, earning a small income by selling illicit substances in small quantities. Ryan then dated a woman named Pamela Ann Maraschini, born on March 3, 1965. Although this relationship seemed stable and promising, he deceived her by continuing to see his former lover, Crystal Billen. Meanwhile, Gail and Rick were living a prosperous life. They had a beautiful home, a result of their hard work, as they invested time and money into renovating it. Both had great jobs, good social standing, and an excellent relationship. Then, one day in November, Ryan had a heated argument with some of his siblings. This led to Dorothy and Wendell, along with some of their younger children, deciding to move to the property owned by Gail and Rick. Some of Dorothy's children opposed the move, but Ryan insisted and pressured them to go. The debate about the move caused tension within the family, especially between Ryan and Gail. Families often face situations like this, and most of the Wyngarden family members thought it would be resolved without too much trouble. However, this incident would be the catalyst for the worst nightmare imaginable. Tragedy struck the Wyngarden family. On Saturday, November 21st, Gail and Rick attended a friend's wedding and returned home later that afternoon. But no one saw them again, although nothing seemed suspicious at first since it was the weekend. By Monday, November 23rd, neither Rick nor Gail showed up for work. This was very unusual to Rick's parents, and when they hadn't heard from him or received any explanation for his absence, they decided to go to the couple's home to check on them. Upon arrival, Rick's parents were confronted with a scene straight out of a horror movie. They found their son's lifeless body inside his truck, slumped over the steering wheel, with fatal wounds to his head. Rick's mother nearly fainted at the gruesome sight, unable to comprehend what she was witnessing. Rick's father mustered the courage to calm his wife, got her back to the car, and then returned to the house to look for his daughter-in-law. He soon found Gail in the master bedroom, lying on the couple's bed. Her lifeless body was covered by a pillow soaked in blood, obscuring her head. Horrified, he rushed out of the house. Struggling to breathe and stay calm, he made his way back to the car and informed his wife that Gail had also been murdered. They decided to call the police and report what had happened. The victims, identified as 22-year-old Gail and 28-year-old Rick, were a sweet and beloved couple. It was hard to believe they had any enemies. No one could understand how or why this deadly attack had occurred against the young couple, who had been married for just over a year and a half, dreaming of spending the rest of their lives together. When authorities arrived, they began collecting various pieces of evidence. Rick's body was found inside his Chevrolet Blazer, parked in the garage at the front of the house. He had been shot twice in the head. Gail, who was found in the master bedroom, had been shot 3 times by the assailant. The case of the couple sent shockwaves through the Holland community for months. The details of the incident were covered by various media outlets. Despite conducting an investigation, the police were unable to gather enough clues to lead them to the perpetrator. They couldn't even determine the circumstances surrounding the attack on the couple. There were no signs of a search or ransacking anywhere in the house, and no significant mess. They found no evidence of a violent struggle. Inside Rick's truck, everything was neatly in place. The bodies showed no signs of a struggle, just the gunshot wounds. As a result, the case did not progress beyond the preliminary investigation. Experts conducted a crime scene examination and autopsies according to the law. However, investigators were unable to determine the motive. They quickly ruled out theft, as nothing was taken from the house. Both Gail and Rick still wore their watches and rings. In the bedroom, $280 was found, and an additional $240 was in a kitchen drawer. Authorities determined that the murders occurred sometime between the evening of Saturday, November 21st, and the early hours of Sunday, November 22nd, since no one saw the couple after they attended a wedding at the Holiday Inn Hotel on the afternoon of the 21st. Officers collected various statements, interviewing family members and potential witnesses, but over time, they still couldn't find significant evidence. The chances of solving the case gradually faded. There were no suspects, and no one was arrested. As time passed, this case, like many other unsolved cases, became a cold case in the archives. Though devastated by grief and loss, the couple's family and friends gradually moved on with their lives. Over a year after the incident, Ryan and Pamela got married and eventually had 3 children, Caleb, Elizabeth, and Benjamin. As time went on, Wendell and Dorothy's love story remained intact after more than 50 years. They had the chance to celebrate their golden anniversary before Wendell passed away on Saturday, July 9th, 2005. His funeral was held at the church where Wendell had been a lifelong member. By the time the father of the family passed away, 18 years had gone by since the deaths of his daughter Gail and son-in-law Rick. He left this world without ever getting the answers about who had taken his daughter's life. It seemed like no one would ever uncover the truth behind the events. But 24 years after the horrific scene in 1987, the Ottawa County Police received some new information that forced them to reopen Rick and Gail's case. In 2009, the Ottawa County Sheriff formed a team to investigate unsolved cases. 2 years later, in 2011, Detectives Venus Repper and David Blakely were assigned to the deadly attack on the young couple. They went through numerous documents, dusting off files that had been untouched for years, some so damaged they had to be pieced together with tape. They conducted more than 200 interviews, even traveling to other states to find witnesses who had since moved away. The investigators hoped that over time, the burden of guilt might lead people to confess what they knew, easing their conscience. For nearly 2 years, Venus and David worked tirelessly, carefully reviewing the events and repeatedly going over reports from the experts and investigators who had worked on the case back in 1987. During this time, they noticed that certain witnesses had been interviewed more than once, and this was no coincidence. It was part of their strategy. Their goal was to encourage those who, for whatever reason, had kept secrets and withheld information to feel comfortable enough to finally reveal what they knew. As Venus later explained in interviews, she often believed that lies would eventually exhaust people. She was convinced that with the right questions, witnesses could open up and share what they had kept quiet about at the time under the emotional strain caused by the events. One of the first memories that resurfaced came from Cheryl, one of Gail's sisters. She recalled that Ryan had once said to her, "I wonder if I could ever do something like what happened to my sister and brother-in-law." That comment was also confirmed by one of the Wyngarden family's aunts. It was indeed a strange question. Detective Venus found it hard to believe that someone would express such a doubt. Upon reviewing the case files, they discovered that Ryan had been interviewed in the days following the incident, but had never been considered a suspect. When asked where he had been on the Saturday afternoon when the crime occurred, Ryan claimed he had been at a friend's house with his girlfriend, Pamela, doing laundry and watching their children. When Pamela was interviewed, she confirmed her boyfriend's alibi. However, upon closer examination of the records, the detectives found that Pamela's second statement didn't align with what she had said earlier, prompting them to call her in for another interview. The detectives summoned Pamela to the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office on January 18, 2013. They brought her into a small room, left her waiting for a few minutes. Then Venus and David entered the room and asked her to recount everything she knew about Gail and Rick's case. As they suspected, Pamela knew more than she had previously revealed, and this time, she decided to unburden the guilt she had carried for over 24 years. At this point, Ryan's wife was about to become the key witness, finally bringing the truth to light. Initially hesitant, she cleared her throat, glanced at the detectives, then bowed her head and revealed that her husband, Ryan, had taken the lives of his brother-in-law Rick and his own sister Gail. She sighed and continued. Ryan had gone to Gail and Rick's house on Saturday night. They had another argument about the house move, and at some point, the situation became tense and heated. Gail and Rick asked Ryan to leave. He walked to his car, but returned, claiming that his car had broken down. Rick offered to give Ryan a ride, while Gail stayed at the house. What happened next was truly horrifying. Ryan shot Rick twice with precision. He then went inside, where he unexpectedly attacked his sister, who was lying in bed in the master bedroom, and shot her 3 times. The following day, Sunday, November 22nd, 1987, Ryan took Pamela to visit his sister and brother-in-law's house. Pamela, who was carrying her 6-month-old son Nathan, her child from a previous relationship, was horrified when she arrived. The first thing she saw was Rick's body inside his truck, and she was in shock. Panicked and terrified, she wanted to flee, but Ryan held her firmly and led her to where Gail was lying. He removed the pillow from Gail's face and forced Pamela to look. She couldn't bear it any longer. It was too much. She ran out in horror and was so scared that she didn't seek help from neighbors. She didn't even consider going to the police. Pamela just ran to the car they had arrived in, opened the door, and sat in the front passenger seat. She waited there for Ryan to return. Pamela told the detectives that Ryan said he was jealous of his sister and brother-in-law. He envied the happiness and success they had. While all of that was true, it wasn't the whole truth. Darker secrets from the past remained hidden. Pamela confessed to the detectives that she had kept this secret all those years out of fear of losing her job and her freedom. Additionally, she wanted to keep her family together because she loved her husband and didn't want to be separated from her children. But at the same time, she felt deep sadness and guilt that weighed on her. Finally, after more than 2 decades, Pamela felt calmer and relieved. For Detectives Venus and David, Pamela's confession, along with the testimony of other witnesses, provided them with enough evidence to prosecute Ryan. On the same day, they arrested him as the prime suspect in the crimes against Rick and Gail. They notified the prosecutor, who would be responsible for proving in court, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Ryan was the one responsible for the deaths of his sister and brother-in-law. At this point, there were many disturbing rumors circulating about Ryan's motive for the crime against his sister's family. Many had heard of an inappropriate relationship between the Wyngarden siblings, but was this the truth? After Ryan's arrest, the case moved to the Holland court. The preliminary hearings were held in February 2013. More than 50 witnesses were called to testify before Judge Bradley Knoll. In conversations with the judge and the public, the prosecutors acknowledged the hard work done by the police, especially Detectives Venus and David, who after more than 2 decades had successfully connected all the missing pieces. Over 2 days, many witnesses took the stand, but they couldn't recall exact dates, places, or even some of Ryan's statements at the time. So much time had passed. This uncertainty was something the defense attorneys, including David Hall, used to question the reliability of the witnesses. At this point, Ottawa County Assistant Prosecutor Lee Fisher admitted the challenges of obtaining reliable testimony, but he remained confident that there were still some key witnesses left to testify. Among them was Crystal Belen. Crystal took the stand calmly, answering all questions fluently and providing very valuable information. Her composure was aided by the fact that Ryan had been removed from the courtroom after a series of disruptive behaviors that prevented the proceedings from moving forward properly. Crystal had been Ryan's girlfriend for 4 years. Their romantic relationship had ended before Rick and Gail's murders, but they had remained in contact as friends and more. In her testimony, Crystal revealed the final decisive piece of the puzzle, the real reason behind the horror Ryan had caused. Before everyone in the courtroom, Crystal recounted that a few days after the incident, Ryan told her he needed to confess something terrible that had been weighing on him. He took her to a park north of Holland and, through tears, confessed that during his teenage years, he had forced Gail into inappropriate intimate contact, completely unacceptable between siblings. And it wasn't just once, it happened multiple times. He admitted that Gail had said no, but he had still coerced her into doing it. Up until then, the idea of non-consensual sexual acts between siblings seemed so unthinkable that no one suspected it could have happened. Crystal recalled in her story that Ryan mentioned one day while they were out on a boat, Rick had noticed him looking at Gail with a lustful gaze. Overcome with fear, shame, and even anger at being exposed, Ryan didn't know how to hide his feelings. This kind of relationship between siblings matched Pamela's testimony about jealousy and envy as Ryan's motive, but it added an even darker layer. It was a horrifying secret that Ryan couldn't let come to light, so he decided to eliminate both of them. When it was Pamela's turn, she again recounted the experience of Ryan taking her to the crime scene. Cheryl, meanwhile, recalled on the witness stand that she had called her brother for comfort, but instead found him to be quite cold, distant, and evasive. She felt that during that conversation, Ryan seemed to downplay Gail's death, saying his sister had lived a good life, as if minimizing the importance of what had happened. The most unsettling moment for her was when Ryan said, "Sometimes I wonder if I could have done it." During the breaks, there were discussions about the weaknesses and unreliability of some of the testimonies. Attorney David pointed out that some information seemed more like rumors. However, the prosecutors relied on what Crystal, Pamela, and Cheryl had testified, as their accounts aligned with the charges against Ryan, asserting that he had committed the crime out of jealousy and to prevent the revelation of the forbidden and incestuous relationship between siblings. Ultimately, the judge determined that the jury needed to carefully consider the evidence and testimony, which would extend the case for some time. At that point, Ryan was 50 years old and remained in the Ottawa County Jail without bail. Then in March 2014, Ryan's trial resumed. More than 60 witnesses testified, including his 2 sisters, his aunt, his ex-girlfriend Crystal, and Pamela, his wife. These testimonies were crucial in establishing Ryan's motive and guilt. The trial lasted for 3 weeks. Another key witness was James Mickham, a childhood friend of Ryan's. Over time, James became Ryan's boss at a tree-cutting service. Although James eventually fired Ryan, they remained friends. In fact, they would still meet almost every day, have coffee, and chat for a while. In one of these conversations, Ryan used certain phrases like a puzzle and hinted to James about what had happened to his sister and brother-in-law. He implied that he was responsible for the incident. Then came the testimony of Lynn, another one of Ryan's sisters, who provided additional insight into the horrifying secrets Ryan wanted to keep hidden. She recalled that shortly after the brutal attacks on Gail and Rick, her brother told her, "I want to apologize to Gail because I feel like I dishonored her." Ryan's defense attorneys emphasized that their client had an alibi for the time of the incident and that there was no clear motive. During the trial, they introduced a theory that the young couple could have been targeted by a biker gang involved in drug trafficking from Detroit. They also suggested another theory involving financial irregularities, and even a third hypothesis that the couple had been mistaken for the former owners of the house. Ryan's lawyer asked the forensic doctor whether the wounds inflicted on the 2 victims could have come from different weapons. The expert responded that it was a single .22 caliber weapon. The forensic doctor also detailed that Rick's body might have been moved, as the steering wheel of the truck had numerous bloodstains, indicating that his head had rested on it for some time, yet his body was found in the passenger seat. To help those in the courtroom understand the attack and the bullet trajectories, the forensic expert used human head models and pointed out the locations of the wounds with rods. The prosecutors also called Pamela, Ryan's wife, to the witness stand. In response to questions, she stated that Ryan had confessed to her that he had taken Gail and Rick's lives out of jealousy over their relationship. The representatives from the prosecutor's office, including Ottawa County Assistant Prosecutor Lee Fisher, based their charges on the testimonies of Cheryl, Lynn, Crystal, and especially Pamela. They all asserted that Ryan was jealous of Rick, and more importantly, he wanted to stop Gail from telling her husband about his dark secret. According to the prosecutor, the argument Ryan had with his sister and brother-in-law about their parents fueled his anger and hastened his extreme actions, as he had already planned to carry them out. When it was Ryan's turn to take the witness stand, Pamela didn't want to be in the courtroom and preferred to sit outside while her husband testified. Ryan became very agitated, complaining that the police and prosecutors had put words in his mouth that he never said. In his testimony, Ryan admitted to having had sexual encounters with his sister Gail 3 times. The first occurred when he was 12 years old and she was 9, the second when he was 13 or 14, and the last time when he was 15 and she was Panirndaude. At one point during his testimony, Ryan appeared as if he was about to break down, but then he insisted that he would never take his sister's life because of that. He added that everything had been consensual, and his sister did not lose her virginity to him. Prosecutors countered Ryan's claim, asserting that it was not consensual and that he had abused and taken advantage of his sister. The jury deliberated for about 4 hours. On March 28, 2014, they reviewed all the testimonies and evidence presented against Ryan. They had no doubts when they found him guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Gail and Rick. Family members were satisfied with the verdict. However, Ryan reacted with outrage, repeatedly shouting that he was innocent. Judge John scheduled a new hearing for Monday, April 21, 2014. When the hearing day arrived, Ryan again displayed a very poor attitude. For an hour, he insisted on his innocence, but he also used the opportunity to lash out at the prosecutors and police, accusing them of turning Pamela against him. Ryan even fought with his own attorneys and called the judge a liar. Ultimately, the hearing concluded with Ryan being sentenced to 2 life terms in prison without the possibility of parole. Both Rick and Gail's families expressed their gratitude to everyone involved in solving the case and securing Ryan's conviction. They specifically thanked the dedicated and persistent efforts of detectives Venus Repper and David Blakely. Through her tears, Cheryl said that her late sister had waited 27 years for justice, and finally, after the sentencing, there was nothing left unfinished. She could now visit Gail's grave, say goodbye, and let her rest in peace alongside Rick. In 2018, Ryan appealed his 2 life sentences to the Ottawa County Court of Appeals, but his appeal was denied, and the Ottawa court's verdict was upheld. Unhappy with the outcome, Ryan petitioned the state's Supreme Court, which also denied his request. Ryan has been incarcerated since January 2013 and will likely die in prison. It's a fitting end for the savage criminal who had no regard for family. The Ryan Wyngarden case is a grim reminder of how terrible secrets can lead to devastating actions. Rather than hiding the truth, it's essential to face it with courage to avoid the pain of deception and guilt. Ryan chose a path of secrets and violence and ultimately paid the price for his actions. And that brings us to the end of today's case. Before you go, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Don't forget to share this video if you think someone you know might find it interesting. See you next time.